Sonic the Hedgehog is a game franchise which I've never played a single game of. I've never owned a single game of. Actually, I take that back. Sonic 2 is free on Steam right now, so technically I own one. I guess you can say I'm a huge Sonic fan. Yeah, not really. I saw the movie though, it was interesting. That old Sonic design, man, that was great. Maybe I should try the games out someday, I don't know. The first ever Sonic the Hedgehog game released in 1991 and was Sega's response to the Super Mario Man. Wait a minute, that sounds familiar. Crash Bandicoot, that series that was seemingly created to have a genre of platformers on the PlayStation and of course to rival the Super Mario Man. Yeah, a lot of companies want their own Super Mario Man. I'm sure all of you know the main gimmick of the Sonic games is to go fast. You know, with the blast processing the Genesis has. The term was created for marketing, it's stupid. Sonic was received fairly well by critics and helped Sega become a genuine rival towards Nintendo. You know, until it all crashed and burned. Poor Sega. The Saturn sucked. Now, I know a lot of people like Sonic. Honestly, I can't have an opinion on it, but I have heard a lot of the newer games are just bad. Once again, don't take my word for it, I've never played them. So, why not take a look at some of the unused content and version differences from the very beginning of the series, what the boomers would call the Golden Age. So, as always, the information on this video was provided by the cutting room floor, and I will end up skipping over some of the things I consider to be really small and insignificant. If you want to see everything, then check out the pages for it. There's the pre-release page and the main article. Links down there. That's where it is, right? Down. Description. Let's go. Oh wait, that's Mario's thing. Now let's go all the way back to before Sonic was even Sonic. Sega, of course, wanted to make sure their console would sell like the NES. They wanted to create a new mascot to replace Alex Kidd. I mean, I can understand why, this guy was lame. Some of the ideas include an elderly warrior man, a wolf wearing an American flag t-shirt, a jester, a bulldog, and a chick with a hat and overalls. Naoto Oshima created the 4 designs it eventually came down to. This guy also worked on the Phantasy Star series. A gray rabbit who could throw stuff with his ears. Here's that mix between Mario and Bart Simpson. This is disgusting. A fat man in pajamas based on Theodore Roosevelt, and a hedgehog named Mr. Needlemouse. Now, 2 of those designs look familiar, don't they? The fat dude eventually became Dr. Eggman's design, and Mr. Needlemouse became Sonic the Hedgehog. Sonic was supposed to have his own Princess Peach-like character at some point named Madonna, a love interest who Sonic would chase around, who also happens to be a human. Does anyone else see this as odd? She was scrapped early on in development, thankfully. And the reason as to why is split up into 2 stories. Madeline Schroeder, project manager of Sega of America, claims she was removed to make the game easier to sell in the West. Yuji Naka claims Madonna was removed because it made Sonic seem too similar to Mario. Mario did indeed sell well in the West, so these reasons completely contradict each other. Oshima drew some potential enemies for the franchise, including a 6-fingered hand, a walking cannon and exclamation mark, a flying hand, a big white ghost, a purple dude with yellow gloves, and a bee-colored Robotnik. The team thought Robotnik's design was the best, and all the other ones were scrapped. The purple guy did make it to a prototype build shown at the 1990 Tokyo Toy Show, but the colors were changed from purple and yellow to blue and red. Sonic was supposed to be in a band. Concept art was made for this idea, but nothing ever came of it. There was also a scrapped sound test where Sonic breakdanced while his band played music, but this is cut, obviously, since I said it was scrapped. Here's some of the early concept art for the Sega logo and title screen. Instead of the iconic jingle, Sonic would have been leaning on the logo. The logo would have slid, making Sonic fall. Sonic's bandmates and Robotnik were then supposed to push in these stripes, and then the Sonic logo came in. Another piece of concept art includes a construction-themed mini-boss where one of Sonic's bandmates was present. During the fight, you would have had to dodge a giant wrecking ball and use 2 platforms to destroy the machine. After you destroy the machine, it would play a cutscene where Sonic and the bandmate cheer. For whatever reason, Robotnik is watching the fight and is on a flying sled that looks similar to the one shown in the ending. The original design for the final boss was quite different. Robotnik was behind a shield shooting turrets at Sonic. The boss probably would have been defeated by tricking the turrets to shoot at Robotnik's shield. Once you beat the boss, Robotnik would run away from Sonic and jump into a plane. Once he takes off, Sonic would jump on the plane and destroy it. Kinda rude. Sonic falls from the sky but is picked up by Sharps the chicken, who is one of his bandmates. He gets flown to Green Hill Zone where his other bandmates and animal friends are waiting for him. They'd land, Sonic would jump towards the player, and then the screen would fade out to black. This concept art shows a small animation that would play whenever Sonic got a special item like a key. The background seems to depict an early version of Marble Zone. This screen would have been played after a zone was completed. Sonic is jumping through a circle with a heart in the middle of it. It is possible this could have been a minigame where the player could obtain more rings or points. Here's an old pre-release screenshot. It shows Sonic jumping and doing a fist pump after completing an act. I wonder where they got the idea for their character to jump like that. While this animation wasn't used, the sprites for it are still in the files. I'll show them later on in the video. This old screenshot shows Sonic with a lighter color palette. This was changed last minute to make it easier to see him against Green Hill Zone's ocean. The title screen changed quite a bit throughout development. Here's a screenshot from Tokyo Toy Show. It has no background and a smaller banner and Sonic text. Here's an early pre-release screenshot, a later pre-release screenshot, and here's the final one. As you can see, the press start button text was removed because it's sort of common sense. Apparently Sonic's expression is also slightly different, but I don't see it. Also, the stage select used a different color palette. Some acts have an X next to them, possibly marking the areas that weren't finished. Also, Final Zone is missing from the list. Several pre-release images have the HUD display the ring counter as ring instead of rings. The title cards had a period after the word act in the pre-release screenshots. A few pre-release screenshots show an early debug mode. Numbers which indicate Sonic's position appear in the bottom of the screen, replacing the lives counter. Ball hogs initially face directly towards the screen and walk similarly to Crabmead. Sega Music Collection. 3 of the tracks in this collection have noticeable differences compared to the final game's music. Green Hill Zone theme matches the one used in the Tokyo Toy Show demo. The special stage theme has a slower tempo, and the Spring Yard Zone theme has a very slightly slower tempo. Level changes. A large checkered ball was supposed to appear at the beginning of Green Hill Zone. It would have chased after Sonic. The ball was removed, however the idle sprite was kept and used in the first boss. Green Hill Zone's background was originally brighter and more detailed. The sunflowers here were originally going to be purple but were ultimately made green. In the game's ending, however, they can still use the original palette. Act 2 of Green Hill Zone had many misplaced rings around the beginning. Also, the place where you originally break through the walls to get 2 ring monitors and a shield monitor. The shield monitor was originally going to be an extra life monitor. You can also see the purple sunflowers I mentioned previously scattered throughout the map. There is also no springs by the 3 patches of sunflowers with a rock in the center. Also, Robotnik originally didn't laugh. Marble Zone. Pictures exist of an early marble zone with flipping platforms, a more segmented ground, chunkier lava, and larger ruins. Pre-release screenshots also show UFOs spinning in the sky. They were red, then they were blue, then they were gone. The first 3 rings in Act 1 are also absent and replaced with a Buzz Bomber and Yadrin Badnik. Spikes was also planned to be in the zone in place of Caterpillar and can still be spawned in with debug mode in the final game. Also, this area's moving platform was changed. In this pre-release screenshot, the background is positioned higher up and lacks rings. The lava also has a less polished appearance. Flames were also added in the background. This is a very late screenshot which shows Act 2 with a monitor before the lava flow, and the monitor is not present in the final game. An early screenshot at the end of Act 1 shows an unused variant of the spike chandelier. This object is still in the files though, I'll show it in a bit, and flames are also added in the background. There are also these moving green blocks in the final game that weren't there in the pre-release screenshot. This pre-release screenshot of Marble Zone Act 3 shows Picky the pig and the animal friend is different in the final version. This was likely due to the zone order being changed. Yeah, the level order did go through some rearrangements. Early on in development, Spring Yard Zone looked completely different and had a completely different name, Sparkling Zone. It was originally supposed to be set in a location with bright buildings in the night rather than a city with mountains. In Act 1, the area near the start had spiked balls spinning around and were removed probably because it made it too difficult. Initially, this obstacle was kept when they turned Sparkling Zone into Spring Yard Zone, possibly because the level order had not been changed yet, meaning the difficulty of the zones had not been changed yet. Here's an early pre-release screenshot showing the early background. It also has a few less rings in it. Lastly, for this area, the slopes were not blocked by a spring. Labyrinth Zone. Every known pre-release screenshot taken here was from a very early state in development. The screenshots lack objects and water. Also, the background was different. In this screenshot here, it looks like there isn't one, but other screenshots show there was indeed a background here. And as mentioned, a different one. In this screenshot, you can also see these crystals. They were made larger in the final game. Also, the vines were thicker at one point. Starlight Zone originally had a less blocky appearance and used truss tiles more often to give it a more under construction look. At some point in development, the area containing 4 monitors at the beginning of Act 1 had 2 pits and a braking platform. Act 2 had a much busier starting area, as you can see in this pre-release screenshot. And lastly, for this area, there were springs in the ceiling here in Act 3. Originally, Scrap Brain Zone was called Clockwork Zone, or Clock-Orc Zone, as the title card font lacks the letter W. The zone was going to be entirely indoors, and the background and foreground would look very similar. The background used was now foreground chunk 10. It wrapped in both directions but did not appear to scroll. The final game uses completely different art for each act. Also, the first row of rings are not there in the pre-release screenshot. Diagonal conveyor belts were once used here, but were removed and likely replaced with the spinning platform conveyors in the final game. These tunnels were originally zigzagged. Every pre-release screenshot of these special stages shows a layout that doesn't appear in the final game. The earliest screenshots have them made entirely out of gold blocks with no rings. This image shows a map based on the early pre-release shown in magazines. The orange wall shows the end of the known area, and the later blocks were placed according to the later pre-release layout. Now, let's take a look at some of the unused Sonic sprites. This sprite's a bit odd, but it shows Sonic gulping air and it was likely used for the air bubbles found in Labyrinth Zone and Scrap Brain Zone Act 3. An edited version of this sprite ended up being used in Sonic Mania Plus. This next sprite is a black and white death sprite. What it would have been used for is unknown. Maybe it would have been used when the player falls into lava. This sprite is also present but unused in Sonic the Hedgehog 2 and in one of the prototypes for Sonic CD. Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Sonic and Knuckles have unused sprites that are similar. These next sprites show Sonic shrinking. Maybe it would have been used when the player is falling, but the actual use is unknown. A sprite where Sonic is sliding, similar to the ones used in Sonic CD. Weirdly enough, modified versions of these sprites appear in the official Hedgehog Day dance party video. This video is stupid. Unused spin dash like sprites, and a similar animation was created for Mighty's hammer drop ability in Sonic Mania Plus. And here's Sonic jumping again. As shown earlier, these sprites can be seen in early development pictures. They would have been seen after passing a goal, and slightly modified versions of these sprites appear in Sonic Mania, and they kept their original purpose. Lastly, for the Sonic sprites, here's Sonic holding his breath. It possibly would have been used when the player is about to drown. Unused monitor sprites. Here's a monitor that shows Robotnik. It possibly would have hurt Sonic like in Sonic 2, Sonic 3 and Knuckles, and Sonic Mania. What was up with that and Knuckles subtitle? I'll never know. Here's a monitor with static on it, used as a default for invalid object IDs. While they can be placed in debug mode, they don't do anything when broken. A monitor with an image of Sonic's unused goggles. I'll get back to the goggles in a bit, which led some people to believe it was originally supposed to be a power-up. In the 2013 remake's debug mode, these became placeable objects and are also worn by Sonic during segments in Sonic Mania. Lastly, for the monitors, a monitor with an S on it. It actually appears in one of the prototypes for Sonic CD, and it gives the player a speed boost and invincibility. In other games that it appears in, it grants the player super/hyper forms. Zone-specific unused sprites. Let's start off with Green Hill Zone. Here's that checkered ball again, which, as shown earlier, can be found in early screenshots and is part of Green Hill Zone's boss in the final game. Originally, it would have been its own object and it would have chased Sonic and crashed through walls that he couldn't break through. It can be seen in the debug mode, but it can't be placed. It can be found in Sonic Mania's debug mode, and it was brought back in the 2013 remake. However, there it is pushed by Sonic. It doesn't chase him. This one's similar to the checkered ball, but it's a wrecking ball. This object is fully functional and hurts Sonic. Some unused tiles, they were actually used in the second act of Green Hill Zone in the 8-bit version. Yeah, you know, the watered down versions for the Master System and Game Gear, the demakes. It is possible that an underground section was once planned for the 16-bit version as well at some point in development. Two faces that look like Gooey from Kirby. They would have been used as decorations, and luckily they weren't. How are these decorative? Marble Zone. Here's that horizontally oriented spiked chandelier thing. It's fully functional, but obviously unused content. Spring Art Zone, an unused sign that says let's go. It is only seen in concept art. Where am I going? Labyrinth Zone has a burrow bot facing downwards. Unknown use. Starlight Zone, some unused lights. Capsule, unused pieces of a capsule. They are loaded into the data of Robotnik's capsule, and concept art shows extra gadgets attached. In Final Zone, we have these Robotnik sprites. The left sprite shows the back of Robotnik's vehicle, which is impossible to see in the final game. In the ending, there's a rosebud with an incorrect palette and functions like a bumper. These next sprites can be seen in normal gameplay by falling out of a special stage using debug mode. Labels for zones 1 through 6. A 1-up icon, which is actually fully functional and will obviously grant the player an extra life. The icon disappears when touched, obviously. A W for Wumbo. Kidding, I'm kidding, that was a stupid joke. Here are some miscellaneous unused sprites. A period, the letter K, a block that actually uses the same color palette as Sonic. Red grass, an unused frame of the Switch sprite, an unused red explosion. These sprites probably would have been used in the ending, as they show Robotnik struggling to stay in the air and then exploding. Press start button, as seen in the pre-release screenshots. Interestingly, it will show up on Japanese systems after viewing the invisible credits. Yes, the region of the system actually matters. I'll talk about the invisible credits once we're at the version differences. Splats the Bunny. This was an unused badnik that seems to have been cut late into development. A trading card and figurine for it were released, but it wasn't even in the game itself. What? It was actually used in Sonic Mania as one of the enemies in Press Garden Zone. In the original game, according to the concept art in the source code remnant from the Sonic 2 Nick arcade prototype, it was supposed to appear in Scrap Brain Zone. And of course, back to the goggles. As mentioned, these were used in Sonic Mania, but what these would have been used for in Sonic 1 is unknown. This is what the goggles would look like when being worn by Sonic. Misplaced objects, those are always fun. In Act 1 of Green Hill Zone, there is a misplaced Modo bug. It's quickly erased from memory because there's no collision area for it to spawn on. This was likely a remnant from an early design. Act 2 of Green Hill Zone has multiple misplaced enemies that are not possible to be seen in normal gameplay as they fall down off screen and unload. A misplaced stone can be found in Green Hill Zone Act 3 near the mini-boss fight. It is impossible to reach it without using debug mode. You can also find an impossible to reach Buzz Bomber off screen. In Act 1 of Labyrinth Zone, there is a group of spikes buried in the ground. Unused level chunks. Labyrinth Zone 4E. Marble Zone 04, 13, and 32. Starlight Zone, now get ready, this area has a bunch. 37, 38, 39, 3A, 3B, 3C, 3D, 3E, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 4A, 4B, 4C, 4D, 4E, 4F, and 50. Yeah. Clearly, it's possible this level had many changes during development. Several of the unused chunks retain the art style used in pre-release screenshots. Scrap Brain Zone, 23 and 33. Now, let's go over all the unused 2x2 tiles. Green Hill Zone, Marble Zone, Spring Yard Zone, Labyrinth Zone, Starlight Zone, and Scrap Brain Zone. Unused sounds. These next three sounds are similar to the spike sounds in the final game. Sonic 1 also has a bit of unused code. There's an unused routine used to squish Sonic, causing him to stick in place as if it were hanging onto the wall. it would play this unused warping animation. There's a third music cue that's never called for. Sonic in these special stages has leftover code that would limit his jump height. There's code to record the demo inputs, which was used a lot during development. And lastly, there is a routine that logs the collision. I've mentioned the debug mode a lot, but I've yet to actually talk about it, so let's do that. The debug mode allows the player to access a number of things, including invincibility, infinite time, debug coordinates which replaces the score, a sprite counter which replaces the time, and of course, placement mode. Press B during gameplay, then from there you can press A to move forward one object, hold A and press C to move back one object, and press C to actually place the object. When paused, you can also press A to go back to the title screen, hold B to enable slow motion, or press C to enable a frame advance mode. Oh wait, I didn't even show how to access it. It can be accessed by pressing up C, down C, left C, right C. There's also a quicker way to access it where you press C, C, up, down, left, right. After you enter the code, press start while holding A and continue to hold A until you see Sonic appear in the level. In the Japanese version on a Japanese system, the code to enter the debug mode is different. Press C, 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 up, down, 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 left, right, hold A and press start. There's also a level select. Press up, down, left, right in the title screen. On the Japanese version on a Japanese system, you press down 3 times instead of once, then you hold A and start. Apparently you can access both the level select and debug mode. You can do so by entering the level select code, pushing any direction on the D-pad after the ring sound, and then entering the debug mode code. I tested it and it's not working for me, so I don't know. Now, the version differences. There's more to this than simply regional differences, but let's start off with that. Alright, so the invisible credits which I mentioned earlier. These credits are hidden on the Sonic Team Presents screen. So apparently you press C, 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 up, down, 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 left, right. A ring noise should occur. Then when the demo starts, hold down, A, B, and C, which makes the screen's background white, making the text visible after the Sega screen. Here are what the credits translate to. In the Japanese version, the level select order is slightly different. Labyrinth Zone and Marble Zone's positions are swapped. Labyrinth was actually supposed to be second at one point. The order was corrected in REV01. REV01, a Japanese revision commonly known as REV01, was silently released, which is more common in the Asian market. Most compilations and re-releases include this revision. Here are the changes. The trademark symbols in both the Sega screen and the title screen disappear. The point system is different. Lives are now granted every 50,000 points if it's played in the Japanese console, and the final boss gives the player 1,000 points in defeat, and beating the final boss grants no points at all. Here, the clouds in Green Hill Zone and on the title screen scroll from right to left. Backgrounds that do not have multiple layers of scrolling do. And the water in Labyrinth Zone and Scrap Brain Zone Act 3 have a ripple effect similar to the one found in Sonic CD. If you hold buttons during the attract mode and ending demo sequences, it will not cause Sonic to miss jumps like they do in other versions. One block is not present in Act 3 of Springyard Zone because it doesn't even load. One area in Act 3 of Labyrinth Zone was made slightly easier by removing an obstacle. There is one extra ring in the first act of Labyrinth Zone. Some of the invisible blocks in Scrap Brain Zone Act 3 were moved up slightly. So, the Wii VC version of this game, it uses the REV00 ROM. That's all I have to say about it. Now, Mega Play, the arcade version. Let's go over the differences here. The rings and time counter in the HUD were switched around. Extra lives are disabled. The player is given a set amount of time to finish a stage. Labyrinth Zone, Marble Zone, Scrap Brain Zone Act 3, and special stages have all been removed, so getting the good ending is impossible. The credits and try again screens were also removed, and a ranking screen was added which uses the special stage theme song. Sonic Jam differences. There's the option to enable the spin dash ability from Sonic 2. Turning this on also changes the behavior of spikes. They use the same behavior from later games and allow Sonic to stay in his invulnerability state. Also note that the Sonic Mega Collection features the same spike behavior change. This version uses CD audio. There's good to this. It prevents part of the music being muted by sound effects. But there's also bad to this, such as songs having large pauses before they play. There are also easy and normal modes, which reduce the difficulty of the game by different measures. Sonic will leave small dust clouds behind him while skidding after changing direction while running, just like in other Sonic games. Now, 3D Sonic the Hedgehog. Sonic 1 was re-released on the Nintendo 3DS in 2013 as part of the 3D Classics line. The same line of games which includes the definitive, lagless Kirby's Adventure, a true blessing. It runs on the Giga Drive, which is a special Genesis emulator that allows games to take advantage of the 3DS hardware. The changes include the addition of the spin dash, the level select being unlocked by default, a CRT style screen filter, stereoscopic 3D graphics of course, customizable controls, and the international and Japanese versions are both selectable. Lastly, the Sega Ages Sonic the Hedgehog. In 2018, a version of Sonic 1 was released under the Sega Ages banner. This version is simply a port of the 3D Classics version, minus the 3D effects of course. There's the inclusion of the drop dash from Sonic Mania, it can be toggled on and off like the spin dash. Also, there was the addition of Ring Keeper mode, a feature from the 3D Classics version of Sonic 2. This mode allows players to start each act with 10 rings and you only lose half of your rings when hit. In addition to the international and REV01 Japanese version, the Mega Play version of this game is also available, making this the first time it's ever been re-released. And lastly, there's a challenge mode in which the player competes for high scores. There's two sub-modes to this, is that the correct word? Time Attack, where you attempt to complete Act 1 of Green Hill Zone as fast as possible, and Score Attack, where you attempt to get the highest possible score in the Mega Play version with only a single life. So, there it is, the unused content and version differences of Sonic the Hedgehog 1. Should I actually play these games and take a look at them one day? Maybe. But for now, that's that. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to drop a like and maybe even a sub. That'd be pretty dandy. Dandy. What am I, in the 1800s? What's that word even mean? Let me look it up. Ah, an adjective for excellent. Things are all fine and dandy. I'm never using that word again.